Should local communities have the power to set speed limits on local roads? Norfolk MP Richard Bacon thinks so. He says he's got support from villages in his South Norfolk constituency, and he's lobbied the Transport Minister. Richard Bacon told me why he's so keen on the idea.
We've already seen the government giving more power to local communities to make decisions about things like whether they want to purchase the local pub if someone closes it down. They've called it the community right to bid. And yet one area where I think probably more say is needed than almost anything else, especially in rural areas, is for local people to have more say over the speed limits. I've lost count of the number of times constituents have said to me that they would like something done in a particular area, in a particular traffic black spot, now, rather than having to wait until somebody's actually killed before something's done.
How would this work? Would it be just down to, say, a local pressure group, or would there have to be a vote on it by parishioners?
Well, there would be a number of ways in which you could do it, and I've suggested to the Transport Secretary that he should think about the principle. You could see how it might be done through a local referendum, a vote of local parishioners. It might just be done through the local parish council after consultation. You don't want to get into unnecessary expense if you can avoid it, but the point is that the local people, through their local community, should have more say than is currently the case.
There are arguments against, chiefly that these speed limits just aren't enforceable. There are already 20-mile-per-hour limits around the city and the county that people just flout.
Well, of course, the whole point about giving the choice to the local community is if people say, well, it wouldn't work here, then they don't have to do it. It's entirely down to them in the local community whether they think it's something that's appropriate. And you're quite right, there are cases where people say it wouldn't work, where even the police will say, well, or the county council will say, well, you know, they can enforce the limit. But actually, sometimes I've encountered situations where the county say one thing and the local beat bobby says, well, actually, I will enforce the limit for the local community. If there is a limit here, I'll happily come along with a speed camera and do it. So it's got to be a matter of local consultation.
So these are some roads that are 40 at present, which could come down to 30, and 30 limits that could come down to 20?
Well, I'm really talking about where the existing limit is at or above 30, and where it could come down from there. So yes, in most cases, I suspect, it would be cases where the limit is already 40 or 30, and where it should be brought down a little bit. Now, I know cases where it's come down to 20 miles an hour, where it frankly doesn't work very well. I've seen other cases where it really works very well, and people do abide by it. So it's got to be a matter of local circumstances and local choice.
But I suppose if you have a 20 limit, then people might drive at 30, whereas before they were driving at 40. It's that 10 miles per hour thing that seems to be in people's minds.
I know one village where there is a 20 mile an hour limit where it's not always observed, to be honest, but very, very frequently people are driving at 25 rather than 35. And the likelihood, if anyone's been on one of those speed awareness courses when they were just over the limit, you are told, and I have been on one of those courses, I found it extremely valuable, actually, you discover that the likelihood of causing serious injury or death goes up almost exponentially. The difference between travelling at 35 miles an hour versus 30 miles an hour, or the difference between travelling at 40 and 35, can be the difference between a life being saved or not.
So are you confident the Transport Secretary will look kindly on this?
I'm certainly sure that he's going to listen. He's a very reasonable man, and he's the sort of bloke who listens. So yes, I think he'll take it seriously, and I will have, when Parliament returns in September, the opportunity to talk to the Roads Minister about it as well.
Richard Bacon, the MP for South Norfolk.